comes to that anxiety that we mentioned earlier, right? Where people are nervous and they feel like the job market is very challenging for them right now. Oftentimes, that also boils down to a concern that they don't have the right skills, or that the skills that they thought were current and up to date 12 months ago might not be current and up to date anymore. And so one of the things that I'll just start with is I want to talk about 4 types of skills as you strategize and think about your career. The first one, which we'll spend the most time on, is cutting edge data science skills. And I use the term data science extremely loosely here. So this could be AI ML, this could be data analytics, business intelligence, etc. But we're going to talk about this. That's certainly the big one right now. But I also want to emphasize for a bit recurring reliables. So these are the underlying skills where, again, Java hasn't gone out of style recently, and it's not going to go out of style anytime soon. For example, if you're really good at Java, you're probably going to have opportunities for various types of jobs. Third one is hybrid data skills. And so what we mean by hybrid here is you've got your data science and maybe you've got medicine, maybe you've got international development, maybe you've got public policy. And how you combine those 2 sets of skills will make you unique, because there's a lot of public policy people out there. There's a lot of AI ML people out there, but there's very few people who do both. And lastly, high-level themes. So these are things like product management, consulting, digital transformations. These are becoming a lot more relevant today. And so being aware that employers not only are hiring for them, but struggling with them is really important. So with that in mind, I have one more quick question for folks, because I'm curious how they're prioritizing these 4 before I talk about them. Of the 4 skill types listed, which one are you most keen to invest in? So if we can get the poll up again, would love to see the responses, and we'll let folks maybe spend 5 seconds answering them. All right, let's see those results. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. I'm not surprised that cutting. So I think folks can see the results, but we're getting 50% on cutting edge data science, 20% on hybrid, 14% high level, and 15% on recurring reliables. So I'm not surprised with the 50%. It's nice to see that everything else is quite balanced as well. So this is great. This is also, not surprisingly, how we've actually put the content together, but that's more of a coincidence. So we'll definitely be talking about cutting edge data science. I'm glad that folks are thinking about the other pieces. One of the things that I will emphasize too with this poll, of course, is while we asked you to pick one, in the real world, you could work on all 4. And in fact, I think the best and most powerful applicants, not even applicants, the people with the most interesting and amazing career trajectories, whether that's first job, second job, promotions, are the ones that combine all 4. So that's also something you'll want to think about. So with that in mind, we're going to start on cutting edge data science skills. So these are skills at the forefront of data and AI ML, right? They can be research oriented, they can be industrial. One of the things that I do emphasize when I'm speaking with folks about cutting edge data skills, however, is that it's a blessing and a curse, double-edged sword, so to speak, because it's also a constant race. Your CV looks really current and exciting today, but if you're not constantly keeping up with those cutting edge skills, very quickly things will get out of date and you might fall behind. Versus, say, they're more reliable skills over time. That's not the case with them. Now, this period is also very, very unique because the amount of knowledge and learning that's going on, especially when it comes to generative AI, is probably faster than any other period that we've seen. And a good example here is of a recent developer survey where actually a set of surveys where 92% of US-based developers say they're already using AI coding tools in and outside of work. Think about that. Like 3 years ago, this was not a thing. Even a year ago, pre-GPT-4, it wasn't really a thing. Now, more than 90% of folks are developers specifically are using AI coding tools. 70% of respondents are planning to use AI tools in their development process. Kind of same idea, same numbers in terms of the vast majority of folks. The other one that I think is really interesting, though, is this last point here, which is those learning to code are more likely than professional developers to be using or use AI tools today. This is really an important point because it shows too that folks who are earlier in their careers, I think, are a little more innovative, a little more open-minded to these tools, which again, if you're in that position right now and you're thinking about what you should be learning, how you should be learning it, et cetera, this is something that you definitely want to prioritize in some form. At the very least, be aware of what's going on and invest in specific types of skills, which we'll talk about. One of the points I want to make, though, is just how quickly things are changing. And I wanted to emphasize this with a seemingly sort of not at the forefront topic like data visualization. We often don't talk about data visualization quite in the same way as we talk about LLMs or computer vision today. But even those fields, these fields like this are changing very, very rapidly. If I was hiring 5 or 6 years ago, I'd be looking for folks who know Google Data Studio, Power BI, et cetera. These are still very important skills, of course. Then we started moving into Jupyter Notebooks, Matplotlib, things like that, followed by more recently Streamlit, Plotly. And you'll notice one of the things that's changing here, even as we start looking at folks that are very good at data visualization, is moving away from kind of like basic tools and drag and drop type tools to actually expecting folks to script a little bit in Python or even launch self-serve apps in some way. And of course, as you look at things today, Gradio, ChatGPT are tools that people are now hiring for, which are kind of the latest and greatest when it comes to data visualization. And as a case in point, if you're really keen on data visualization and you haven't played around with ChatGPT's data visualization solutions and data analysis tools, like that's a huge opportunity. A lot of people want to use those tools. They're not sure what they are. They're not sure how they fit into their technical stacks. So if you can come in and say, hey, I've tried it and I have some experience here, that's great. And the other thing I want to emphasize here when it comes to upskilling and keeping current, this isn't the sort of thing where you have to have a PhD in ChatGPT. That's obviously impossible. What people are really looking for in these scenarios is just the fact that you're somewhat familiar with them and that you can address specific business problems and questions with these new tools, or at the very least know when these new tools apply versus when they do not. Now, some of the skills that are actually in demand today, based on what we're doing with employers and conversations we're having with students and also external research, there's 3 buckets that I really want to talk about. The first one, this blue one, is basically being able to use generative AI tools. So not necessarily, write research papers, but simply know what their capabilities are, know how to use them to solve business problems. And so when we see employers talking about this, again, we see things like ChatGPT and Midjourney. We see applications like AI content creation. Again, if you want to be in marketing and you want to be an AI-driven marketer, knowing how to write content with the help of ChatGPT or how to structure a workflow with ChatGPT and Midjourney is incredibly powerful. Then there's this middle bucket, which is more about configuring and customizing these tools, but again, not necessarily building them. So these are things like being able to create chatbots and use LLMs rather than logging into ChatGPT and using the front end. Model fine-tuning, tools like LangChain and BERT, and of course, prompt engineering. And this is, again, this isn't super technical, but it's technical enough that, again, you can customize tools. And that's what you want to show employers. And then the last bucket is that you can literally build completely new products, tools, solutions using this sort of technology. So knowing what vector databases are and knowing what retrieval augmented generation is, obviously TensorFlow, PyTorch, diffusion models, etc. And so the really important thing here that I want to emphasize is there's 3 types of stories that you can tell here. There's the story of, I know how to use these tools. So if you're a business and you're launching a new product or you're launching a new marketing campaign and you want to use generative AI, or if you're a team lead and you want to know how you could use co-pilots to improve a developer workflow, I know how to do those types of things. Then there's the I can configure these tools where, hey, we're launching something new. We're entering, let's say, the medical space, and no one's really used ChatGPT in a certain way in medicine. Well, I think I can help you configure existing tools to do that. And the last, of course, most technical, is I can build these. So we can do completely new research. We can build new products. We can code things from scratch. And I want to, as you think about your story, as you think about reaching out to employers, what I would encourage you to do is think of which of these three buckets make the most sense for you. And then from a technical perspective, from a career trajectory perspective, and then choose how you invest in these tools and how you actually show people that you can use them. Now, there are a few different ways to keep up and to actually track what these types of skills are, which skills are becoming more and more relevant and in demand. Obviously, attending webinars like this one is a great place to start. There's lots of tech conferences out there. In fact, I would say tech conferences right now are probably the highest sort of signal to noise ratio. Lots of people going to them, lots of people presenting. There's meetups as well. One of the things that's been happening, I would say, over the last 5-6 years, certainly as the archive graph has been going up, is there's more and more reading groups. So there's data science reading groups where you can see what papers people are reading and discuss them. So even if you're not a researcher, you can meet with researchers who will help synthesize and analyze what the research is saying. There's Discord communities, Twitter, email newsletters. I'm being a little bit vague here because it really depends quite a bit on your specific area. And I'll give you an example, which is, again, one that sometimes people don't really think about when it comes to certainly data science, AI, ML, but I think is very relevant illustration, Django. So Django is a web framework. It's been around for about 20 years. A lot of people even ask the question, is it still relevant? Why am I not using React? Or why am I not doing something completely different? And even today, Django is still getting completely new versions, completely new features that are being released, things like asynchronous web calls or new API features. And you know, if you want to be an expert in Django, for example, there's 2 sets of conferences every year, DjangoCon USA, DjangoCon Europe. You don't have to go and attend. You can watch the recordings themselves and skip to the highlights, for example. So the amount of investment you actually have to make here isn't like weeks every year or weeks every quarter. What you really just have to do is keep up to date, skim those recordings and decide if there's anything new that's coming up that you're learning. There's, of course, Reddit threads and subreddits like Django Learning. And of course, there's podcasts as well, right? And again, I'm not saying everybody on this call should go out and specifically learn Django, but rather that what you should do and ultimately want to focus on and emphasize is find the communities that are most relevant to your space, get involved in them, track them over time, and decide what skills, what topics are they bringing up that might be relevant for you from an upskilling perspective. This is also true on the research side, and I would say it's particularly difficult if you're a researcher because one of the things that comes up with research is the fact that, well, A, it's changing, but B, people don't often see the concrete impacts of research, right? So let's say you don't know what Django is and you learn it, you can show your employer that you can build web apps very quickly. Reading the most recent research papers might not actually have that same tangible result. At the same time, oftentimes what we find with employers, if people are moving from research into industry, is employers really often don't appreciate how much time it takes to read research papers and to keep up to date with them. And so they'll assume that this is something you're doing on the weekend, or that it's something that if you do every few months, you know, you're going to be fine. In reality, it's probably something you want to invest in on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And so one of the things that I recommend doing here is, number one, just if you're working with an employer that doesn't hire a lot of researchers, educate them, show them why this is so important, number one. And number two is don't be afraid to ask for reading days. And what I mean by reading days is literally have people or have a manager give you a day, a week, or every other week, or maybe a few hours, so that you could just read those research papers. Again, it's very beneficial to them because you're obviously reading research papers that are relevant to you, relevant to your job. But at the same time, they might not realize that this is work. This is work. And so you need to do it. You need to educate them on it. Of course, there's conferences in academia. I won't go through these in too many details, but NeurIPS, KDD, ICML, there's tons that you could be attending. And that's another area that employers are often very happy to support. And again, you could you'll hear about this when we talk with our panelists as well, but research-oriented companies are very, very active at these conferences. And so they'll often be happy to send you or have you even publish papers there, because it helps with branding, it helps with knowledge sharing, and it helps ultimately with solving whatever problems they're trying to solve. Again, there are tons of online resources for this. The archive is a great one. The other one that not as many people are aware of that I really encourage, and I'll be talking about this during the technical interview portion of this presentation, is websites like Papers with Code, where you have the actual papers published, but you also have the code and the source code that maybe the researchers wrote get published as well, so that if you're actually trying to implement things, you'll be able to see their code and use it. It's a great way to practice coding based on research, and it's a great way to also keep up to date with the research itself. Again, there's tons of forums out there, and of course, there's the Vector Institute. I would encourage everybody here to go and go to every single research event that Vector's organizing. Now, one of the other things that I want to emphasize, especially since we're getting quite a few questions when it comes to portfolios, is a word of caution around ChatGPT. So one of the things that has changed quite a bit when it comes to people showing their skills and emphasizing their skills and capabilities is more and more folks are using ChatGPT, which is great. But what it also means is it's becoming easier to build certain types of applications. So 3 years ago, if someone applied for a job that I was hiring for, let's say an NLP, and they had a portfolio or a project that they show me where they're doing sentiment analysis of tweets, 3 years ago, that was relatively difficult to do, right? You had to potentially scrape Twitter. You had to build a model using BERT or Hugging Face Transformers or TF-IDF or something like that. Today, you could literally get ChatGPT API access and build a sentiment analyzer without doing any real data science. And as a result, the two things are happening. One, it's becoming difficult for me to see which types of portfolios are truly technical. And of course, now if I have to pick between multiple folks and some of the portfolios are technical and some I'm not so sure about, I'm going to go with the technical folks. And number two, some of the portfolio projects and illustrative projects that you might have been working on might be a little out of date. So if what you've been working on can very easily be built in ChatGPT, for example, strategize around that and try to emphasize the technical achievements that you've actually made when building those projects. On the flip side is if your portfolio is literally a bunch of API calls to ChatGPT, you're probably going to have a hard time impressing an employer. So I just want to emphasize that. The other word of caution that I want to emphasize here is around certificates. We get this question a lot. People ask if they should go out and get certifications. And, generally speaking, one of the things I recommend here is, again, skills are more important than qualifications. If you can show employers how you can use Python or PyTorch or GPT-based models or whatever else, that's more important than having the certification. Where I encourage people to get certifications and certificates is if your industry requires them. If you're working in cybersecurity, there's certain specific certifications that are actually relevant to cybersecurity. If you're working in DevOps, sometimes folks require like an AWS certification. So if your employers aren't specifically asking for them, I would de-emphasize this unless it's a personal learning experience for you. The other thing I want to emphasize here is most cutting edge data science skills don't have really good certifications yet. I'm not sure, like I see a lot of folks telling me they're debating whether to get like a certification in ChatGPT, for example. There's tons of books when you go to the bookstore on ChatGPT. I don't really know what they add. Like the content is changing so fast that by the time the book is published or their certificate is available, I feel like the content might already be out of date. So you really want to strategize here. And again, it's more important to simply get the skill set and illustrate it rather than worry about the certification. Again, I talked a little bit about this already, but everything I just said, it's also very important to manage your boss or your manager. So within this context of skills and upskilling, the company you're working for might be able to help you out. Oftentimes, especially if you're coming from grad school or academia, they might not be familiar with how to help you unless you're joining a corporate research lab specifically. But many of these employers ultimately want you to be successful. So you'll have to take some initiative and be proactive and be open with them and ask them for certain things. This means managing your own network and your learning, and also being transparent with your manager or your HR function about your objectives and asking asking them for support. So ask them for those reading days. If there's a professional development budget, it might not be, let's say, enough to go to a conference. Sometimes, again, companies are happy to top it up to make sure you can go to that conference, especially if you're publishing. So just make sure you do this and that you're proactive. Okay, so that's cutting edge data science. If you're picking up ChatGPT, if you're picking up LLMs, if you're picking up generative AI, if you can show whether you can build the tools, whether you can configure them, or whether you can use them to solve your employer's problems, I think you're going to be in a great spot. What I do want to talk about for a few minutes now is some of these other skills. The first one is recurring reliables. One of the things that I really emphasize for folks is, while it's, again, everybody likes to read about generative AI right now, it's a fun topic, right? It's existential AI risk is even more interesting. It's like sci-fi meets your day-to-day job. How cool is that? Or how scary is it, depending on how you're looking at it. But the other thing that I want to emphasize is that there's a lot of skills that don't go out of style. This is a screenshot from a recent developer survey in terms of hiring, and the vast majority of people are working with JavaScript, HTML, Python, SQL, right? These tools, they're going to be important 5 years from now. They were important 20 years ago. They're going to probably be important 20 years from now too, right? And so if you can show that you're good at these things, that's really, really important. And it provides a really, really, really solid base. Similarly, if I have to choose between someone who's keeping up with cutting edge data science, but doesn't really understand or know Python, or doesn't have good kind of developer practices, yes, it's exciting that they know certain things about generative AI, but if I'm not sure if they'll be good over the years, then I probably will go with someone who's a little more, has that kind of stable base of skills as well. Companies today need Python, JavaScript, Excel, Power BI, etc. So make sure you're emphasizing those. And I want to give you an example here of some of these oldies but goodies that we often forget about, especially if you're coming from academia. My one biggest gripe here is around data set curation and creation. So oftentimes when you're working in academic settings in particular, you will be given a data set because there's a lot of standardized data sets. In industry, you often have to build those data sets yourself. And so this is a huge challenge. And again, you'll notice there's no specific technology or language here. The idea here is, can you just build good data sets? Do you know what that means? Do you know how to run a survey, or do you know how to crawl the web properly? These are the sorts of things that become really exciting to folks. ETL, same idea, and data pipelines. Can you actually connect that raw data that you're collecting into the model? Really, really valuable. And again, often forgotten. Tools that maybe not as popular now, especially in those developer surveys, but certain specialized companies are desperate for, are MATLAB, Stata, SPSS, etc. These are all really critical data science tools that people often forget. And of course, Excel. I mean, Excel works really, really well. And a lot of companies are desperate for people who know how to use Excel properly and how to use it in a scalable fashion. But of course, remember that these also require upskilling. I'm sort of talking, let's say, about kind of high level things like ETL or data pipelines. The actual technologies might be changing. And so again, you still want to go to the conferences. Just because you have the recurring reliable skills doesn't mean that you can stop worrying and retire and coast for the rest of your life. What it means is instead that you've got a theme that you're going to work around. And so when it comes to things like data pipelines, a few years ago, you would have been, certainly 20 years ago, it would have been SQL and Bash, for example. Then AWS comes along, Talent comes along, and now you've got things like Snowflake, DBT, Airflow, etc. So these things are changing still, and you do want to keep up to date, but of course, in a slightly different way. Second last skill or theme is hybrid data science. Again, really important here because I think particularly the crowd that we have at this webinar, I think we're all very diverse. And one of the pieces of feedback that drives me crazy that people seem to get when they go through resume reviews with their guidance counselor or their career center at school is de-emphasize these other things. They're not as relevant. And I actually encourage people to do the opposite. If you can actually show how all of your other experiences make you a better kind of person that can problem solve and build models, then that's incredible. Like an obvious example is medicine. We have a lot of folks at U of T in particular that I meet with that are hanging around UHN, for example, where they have that medical or biological background and they want to pivot into AI/ML. Well, when you combine the two, there's very few people who can do both. Another example that comes up a little less frequently, but I think is actually really, really cool, especially this week, is people who have public policy or international development experience, where they maybe they studied politics and then they pivoted into AI or into computer science, and they're not sure, like, well, is it relevant? Is it not relevant? It's like, you know what? Especially right now, if you've been talking to employers over the last few years about public policy and AI, there's a good chance they're really excited to talk to you today, because this week has been particularly important when it comes to that. And so sometimes you can't predict these things, but at the very least, you can show how you can combine these different things. The other piece that's really important here is sometimes these other subject areas make you a better kind of abstract thinker or problem solver. So again, something like public policy or international development, just since I'm kind of thinking about that now, you might be really good at managing stakeholders. And so now if I'm hiring a consultant who needs to know data and AI, but also will be dealing with maybe contentious clients or stakeholders, having that experience is really interesting to me. And at the very least, you can tell a really good story that will be compelling. So where your various vast experiences with pride, try to combine the two. And again, a really wonderful place to combine the two to illustrate this is in your portfolio. If you build a project that combines your various interests, that's really incredible, and it'll really stand out. It'll make you seem like a very original person and a very original thinker. And then finally, what I do want to talk about is high-level themes. This is kind of that last bucket. And with high-level themes, really what you want to do is emphasize, can you solve the business problem? Can you communicate your solutions? Can you ship a product? Can you manage a data science project for me? And these are usually themes that are more like important from a managerial perspective. But I do want to emphasize them here because oftentimes, especially right now, a lot of businesses are investing in AI and trying to use AI for bigger strategic purposes, and they're going to struggle. I guarantee you, they're all going to struggle. And the reason they're going to struggle is it's really fun, again, to talk about LLMs and how an LLM or a neural network converges, let's say, over time. But what's hard afterwards is to say, great, can we actually take that neural network and build a product around it? Or can we train users to use it, to trust it? And so things like product management, user experience, sales and marketing, solution engineering, and digital AI transformation and consulting, these are areas where they're much more business focused, much more focused on kind of people skills. But if you have a data science base or you can be that bridge, it's incredibly powerful. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we've run a few different webinars in the past about this specific topic. So there are a few links here, specifically nuances of data roles and hybrid career trajectories. Our last webinar, Launching Your AI Data Career in 2023, we spent a lot of time on product management, on AI transformations, et cetera. So I would encourage you to check those out.